Chair lays out on second reading HB 3619. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 3619 by Bowers, relating to the criteria considered by groundwater conservation districts before granting or denying a permit.
The chair recognizes Ms. Bowers to explain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. House Bill 3619 protects Texans' property rights in groundwater. It amends Section 36.113, subsection 2 of Section D of the Water Code, which specifies the considerations a district must make when evaluating whether to grant or deny a permit. Currently under
Mr.
36...
Speaker.
Mr. Canales, for what purpose?
The gentlelady yield for some questions.
Will the lady yield? The lady yields for questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Representative, I appreciate your work on this bill, but I do have some concerns.
Okay.
So this in fact increases the authority of groundwater districts to deny private landowners permits. Isn't that correct?
No, it does not. It will protect landowners' property rights in groundwater, and it helps fulfill a groundwater district, conservation district's authority to protect property rights.
So there are groundwater districts, and those districts are regulating water wells in certain areas. Is that correct?
Okay. Well, currently, when evaluating whether to grant or deny a permit, a groundwater conservation district must consider whether the proposed use of water will unreasonably affect groundwater and surface water resources and existing permit holders.
But certain wells are already exempt. They're already exempt from having to be regulated by these groundwater districts. And what you're doing is, in this bill, those wells that are exempt, you're now including them.
They're not included on the list. So to address the oversight, House Bill 3619 would add unreasonable impacts to registered exempt wells to the list of considerations a ground conservation district must make before granting a permit.
So respectfully, Representative, the question I'm going to ask it again so you can help me is, there are certain wells that are exempt. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what you're doing in this bill is you are now taking those wells that are exempt from having to go to the groundwater district, and you're putting them back in.
They need to be put back in to protect those landowners because they're exempt and they're not on the list.
So if they were exempt, you're saying they need to be put back in the list for what reason?
So Chapter 36 defines an exempt well as a well that is used solely for domestic use or for providing water for livestock or poultry.
And now you're going to put those back on having to apply for permits or go through the groundwater district?
No.
Okay, so can you explain to me what you're doing with the exempt wells then?
The exempt wells are, if the well is located on a tract of land larger than 10 acres and it is incapable of producing more than 25,000 gallons of water a day, those wells are a rural well that landowners across the state depend on for basic needs. And right now, groundwater conservation districts are not required to consider whether these wells will be impacted by a proposed permit.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. King, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, will the lady yield for a question?
Yes.
The lady yields for questions.
So just to clarify, Representative Bowers, the exempt wells are being counted into the calculation so that the groundwater district has a better idea of how much the total water pumpage is, and it helps them make a decision of whether or not to give a larger permit later on.
Yes.
But the person who already has an exempt well is not going to be required to apply for a permit again.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. It's a good bill.
Thank you. Okay. Members, House Bill 3619 will protect landowners' property rights in groundwater and help fulfill groundwater conservation districts' property rights. With that, I move passage.
Question occurs on passage of engrossment of HB 3619. All in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 3619 is passed to engrossment.